Good morning, everyone, and welcome to A Bettor Morning, presented by Rival Fantasy. I'm Heather Klein. Rival Fantasy is the all-in-one fantasy sports platform. We have a special edition of A Bettor Morning. We will be hitting the biggest stories in sports. Here is your host, Corey Parson.
Thank you very much. What's up, Heather? It's your boy, Corey Parson, the Fantasy Executive, holding it down solo on a Monday morning, August 14th. We are hot and heavy into fantasy football draft month. Had a big weekend of preseason NFL action. Also had a big weekend out there in Canton, Ohio at the Fantasy Football Expo. I got a chance to actually get some face-to-face time with our good friends, Britt Flynn, as well as my man, Andrew Cooper, Howard Bender, and Matt Deutsch as well. So good times this weekend at the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. But now we got to get down to the serious business of getting you ready for your upcoming fantasy season. And let's start with some of the weekend's action in preseason football. Had a big weekend of preseason action. Games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I got a chance to take the first look at some of the players that we have been looking to have a look at. And I want to start off with the Green Bay Packers and the Cincinnati Bengals. This game right here, Packers 29, Bengals 19. The Packers cover the spread as 4-point favorites. Over 36.5 is the wager that cashes on the total side as well. My main man, Jordan Love. Listen, not a electric performance, but 7 for 10, 46 yards with a touchdown pass. Jordan Love came in there to me. He looked solid, had command of the offense. And you say, how can you tell he had command of the offense? It was only a couple plays. This is a guy that's been sitting behind the great Aaron Rodgers in that quarterback room with the great Aaron Rodgers for 3 seasons already. I think the young man is going to come out here, like I've been saying, and be fresh and surprise some people. I'm really starting to love my Green Bay Packers at plus 400. Well, my Green Bay Packer wager at plus 400 to win the NFC North. They right now are being predicted to finish last in that division. Listen, Jordan Love is not a last place quarterback. I don't care what you say. That division, the Lions this and the Bears that. I think Jordan Love is going to have this Green Bay Packer team right in it. You know the weapons that he has around him. And that plus 400, that's a pretty good wager. Aaron Jones out there on that team. You still got my man Christian Watson, who was being drafted pretty hot and heavily in those drafts this week. And a lot of people with expectations for him as well. So Romeo Doubs as well, the case. All guys going off the board now. Jordan Love has not turned into a fantasy asset yet. But I think Jordan Love is going to be one of the first players coming off the waiver wire when the season does get started. So I am very optimistic and bullish on the Green Bay Packers going into the season. In Bengal land, listen, Joe Burrow throwing footballs this weekend, running sprints on the sideline. So it looks like Joe Burrow is going to be fine. His draft stock, Jamar Chase draft stock, T. Higgins draft stock still intact. And we saw that over the weekend. So I would not expect too much issues for Joe Burrow going forward. But the player really right now that I like in this game was Jordan Love and what he was able to do, looking extremely confident, in control, in command of that Green Bay Packer offense. Listen, take him as a QB2 for your fantasy leagues because I'm telling you, when the season starts, he's going to be a hot waiver wire pickup for guys that may have played quarterback chicken a little bit too long and come up with a guy that they don't like. More preseason action from over the weekend. The Atlanta Falcons and the Miami Dolphins. Atlanta 19, Miami 3. The Falcons cover as a 2-point dog. They also hit on that money line and the under cashes as well. Only 22 points scored in this game right here. But interesting, and we've seen the ripple effects in fantasy from over the weekend of Miami Dolphin running back Devon Achane, rookie running back, 10 carries for 26 yards, nothing to sneeze at, 4 catches for 41 yards. You know how much we like that right there. That's 8 fantasy points in the PPR. Now, you still got Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert to pass on the depth chart, but the way the usage looked, the way they make sure they got him involved, 10 carries, only 26 yards. That's only 2.6 yards a pop. But you see that he's catching passes in the passing game, and they're making it a premium to get him the football, to get him going. So Devon Achane, who right now is going in about rounds 9 or 10 of fantasy drafts, I think you can start to see that move up. So if you are a fantasy manager that's looking to get a chain on your team, I think you're going to have to come into that 7-8 round range as we move down the stretch, especially if he continues to get that work in the preseason. So I think he's an asset that is going to be on the up as we move through the back end of August and into September as we get ready for fantasy football. The Miami Dolphins team now, plus 275 to win what's going to be considered one of the better divisions in football, and that AFC East. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills favored in that division, followed by the New York Jets, who have a lot of hype circling around them. But listen, Miami, with a healthy Tua, is going to be a team that I believe is going to be able to compete. That AFC East is going to be rough. It's going to be tough because everybody talks, oh, Dolphins, oh, Bills, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. They don't even mention the fact that you got a Hall of Fame head coach down there in New England, and they're sitting at plus 750 to win the division. And I tell you what, that ain't a bad wager either. So, but no, definitely keep an eye on Devon Achane. He was a guy that actually went for double digits in the auction this weekend that I was able to be the auctioneer of. So keep an eye out for him in that running back situation in Miami. He can end up being a guy that can really help your fantasy team a lot. Now, let's go to Pittsburgh versus Tampa. Pittsburgh Steelers 27, Tampa Bay 17. Pittsburgh cashes as a 2-point favorite. We also get the over 39 to come in as well. And Kenny Pickett looked good in this game right here. He was out there to get the job done. And I expect Pickett to be a guy in that system, in that organization. You know, the standard is the standard. So I expect Pickett to be a guy to come out there and look good, right? And he, like I said, he didn't tear it up. He wasn't great, but Pickett did look good. But I do want to talk about Jaylen Warren. Interesting second-year running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 3 carries for 13 yards, right, in this game right here. But last year, he had 28 catches, and he averaged around 8 yards a catch. When you can average around 8 yards of reception as a running back, almost a first down, that's close to Christian McCaffrey type numbers. Now, I'm not comparing Warren to McCaffrey. I'm just saying that's a measurable that shows you, if anything, that that's a running back that should be on the field. He can be had for a steal right now. He may even have a little bit more wiggle than Najee Harris, who's going in the 3rd round of drafts. So I think he is definitely, Warren, I'm speaking of, a handcuff candidate. But I also think he could have some standalone value as well. He is a steal in drafts, as I mentioned. So Jaylen Warren is a player that I am going to be taking in a lot of fantasy leagues this year as a late round running back flyer. He was being drafted and bid on this weekend in the Kings Classics leagues out there in Canton, Ohio. So he's in the mix. Now, as far as the Pittsburgh Steelers go, tough division. Just like the AFC East, the AFC North is a tough division. Super Bowl winning head coach in that division, Lamar Jackson in that division, Joe Burrow in that division, and a Hall of Fame head coach and Mike Tomlin in that division. Let me tell you how much respect that they have for Mike Tomlin. The Steelers' projected win total is 8.5. That's for a team that people think is going to finish in last place in that division, and their win total is 8.5. So they're telling you Pittsburgh is going to be in the playoff hunt all season long. Now, that win total at 8.5, that's a lot of respect. I think they are an 8 or 9 win team, this Pittsburgh Steelers team. But you see the respect that they have for Coach Tomlin setting that number at 8.5. And I guarantee you people going out there and hitting that over. So we know what Pittsburgh is. Now, Harris is a story in volume on one hand, and I think talent on the other. But I think as Pickett grows in the offense, the role of everybody in the offense will grow as well. So I do like those Pittsburgh Steelers, and Najee Harris as an RB2 in the 3rd round is not bad. If you want to go double wide receiver and start with Harris as your RB1, not ideal, but I don't really have a problem with that either. I think that Pittsburgh offense is going to be better than expected. Now, another offense that I think is going to be better than expected, an offense that spent a lot of time in the news last week with situation between Ron Rivera and Eric Bieniemy. I was about to say head coach Eric Bieniemy because that's who he spoke like last week, while Rivera spoke like the assistant. But Washington Commanders, Cleveland Browns, Commanders 17, Browns 15. Washington covers as a 2-point dog. They hit on the money line as well. The under 37.5 catches in this one. But I want to talk about HTTC. Hail to the Commanders. Sam Howell gets it done. 9 for 12 for 77 yards and a touchdown. We also saw Jahan Dotson catch 2 passes for 30 yards and a touchdown. And how about Chris Rodriguez Jr., rookie running back, 5 carries for 39 yards. He is going undrafted. So you're really going to start to see him creep into the back end of the drafts this week as he had a good performance. A lot of Antonio Gibson guys out there. A lot of Brian Robinson guys out there. Love all of that. But listen, a guy like this that can run like this, it's not like he's coming in behind, you know what I'm saying, top-tier talent. That's not King Henry in front of him. You know what I mean? That's not Christian McCaffrey or Joe Mixon even in front of them. It's guys like Gibson and Robinson. So I think he could be a guy that I would take a flyer on. Now, a lot of people are on Jahan Dotson. I don't think we're going to get to the point to where we see Dotson's ADP creep up and catch up to the ADP of Scary Terry McLaurin. But I do think you'll see a rise in that ADP. Like, I always looked at Dotson as a guy who was more of a team option than he was so much a fantasy option. But I do think that Dotson's going to be a guy that's going to get it done this season, a popular draft pick. The Fantasy Exec will have shares of him this season, so you should do that as well. As far as Sam Howell goes, a lot of people saying, oh, I don't like Howell. They're a last place team. I don't like Howell. Commanders right now win total 6.5. I would bet the over on the 6.5. I also seen Commanders at about plus 195 to that plus 220 range to make the playoffs. I think the Commanders can be a team that can make the playoffs this year. So that's one of the wagers that I do like. Washington over on their 6.5 win total. Washington also to make the playoffs. I think people are sleeping on Sam Howell, but he's in there. He's got a good offensive coordinator. At least we think a good offensive coordinator. He may not be a player's coach, but he does know how to coach and be enemy. So I don't think it's going to be a bad situation in Washington this year. So shout out to the Commanders. They could be on to something this year. Now, on the other side of the ball, I do want to touch on once again Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Another great performance, throwing the football, running the football. No chance to win this starting job, but he's an asset that could set himself up to be a guy that's traded next season. I think that could be interesting right there. So keep an eye on what Dorian Thompson-Robinson is doing, because I think he looks like he has a pretty good future ahead of him. Now, before we get on and go any further, I do want to give a shout out to the people at Rival Fantasy. And don't forget to start a 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and cheat sheet for free. Go to fantasyalarm.com/draft. Once again, start that 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm's all-pro subscription, and get the Fantasy Football Draft Guide and cheat sheet for absolutely free. Go to fantasyalarm.com. Got a chance this weekend to hang out with the Alarm crew. Boy, I tell you what, we had a good time. But before we get into the good times we had, let's get back to the action. Buffalo Bills, Indianapolis Colts. Bills 23, Colts 19. If you were on Buffalo, they cashed at +3. The money line hits as well. And the total of over 36.5 is one that cashes as well. If you're going to wager on preseason games and you're going to bet an underdog, don't take the points, bet the money line. And I think we're seeing more overs in preseason action than we have in the past. But let's get to this situation right here. Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson, not a great performance. Only his first performance. But let's be honest, 7 for 12 for 67 yards and an interception is not great. So it's going to be some growing pains for Richardson, right? So I think, listen, let's see how he gets through the season. You still got Shane Steichen offense. You still got the rushing ability. I don't want to put too much stock in the preseason game. Now, you can say, well, Exec, if it was a player that you didn't like, you would put a lot of stock in the preseason game. but I still think the talent of Richardson is going to come through and shine. And I like the coaching situation that he found himself in, but obviously his first action, only throwing for 67 yards on 12 attempts, is not great. But Richardson is not the story in Colts camp this week. The story is going to be Jonathan Taylor, as yesterday Shane Steichen, Colts head coach, told the media that he expects Taylor back at practice this week. Now, if Taylor is back at practice this week, Taylor said he wasn't coming back to practice until he was fully healthy. Now, Taylor also said he was willing to play on his contract with no problem. So his talk can change from time to time depending on which way the wind blows. But even if he's back in there and he's healthy, the dudes that got Taylor in the third round, in the late second round, in the mid-second round even, that could possibly be a steal, as you're getting a guy that can really lead the NFL in rushing in the third round. So if you are somebody that's risk-averse and left Taylor on the board, that could have been a mistake. You know, me, sometimes I will take risks, sometimes I won't. Taylor was a player that I was willing to take a risk on, despite just 2 weeks ago that looking like a real nasty situation. But yeah, no, I like it. I think, listen, if they get him in there, get him up to speed, get him ramped up, he's going to help the quarterback. And the Colts are in a division that, listen, is led by Jacksonville, but I think the Colts can be an interesting team this year. Now, Deion Jackson, 6 carries for 35 yards. Maybe Jonathan Taylor saw the way Deion Jackson was toting that thing and decided to get back on the field, call us and say, listen, I'm going in because I don't want Deion Jackson taking my job. But Deion Jackson has put himself into a position to be a draftable fantasy asset this season. Like I said yesterday, 6 carries for 35 yards, and that Colts lost to the Buffalo Bills. Let's head to Chicago and Tennessee. Chicago Bears 23, Tennessee Titans 17. Bears cash as a -3.5 favorite. So you get that one in right there. Also, another over. Seeing some preseason overs this year, over 36.5 cashes. DJ Moore had a 62-yard touchdown catch, and really his first play as a Chicago Bear. Justin Fields, all right, let the hype train begin. Justin Fields, 3 for 3 for 129 and 2 touchdown passes. Now, Fields has aspirations this season of stepping up into that next level of quarterback. 100% full disclosure, I'm not a guy that thinks he can do it, right? I looked at what he did last year, and I wasn't that impressed. Now, this year, they say he's going to take that next step, a la what Hurts did last year. Now, I don't think that next step for Fields end up in a Super Bowl, but I still think it makes him a very interesting fantasy option. Right now, he's going off the board at around QB 7. I think that can go up. I think he can start to pass guys like Justin Herbert. He should not pass Lamar Jackson, but he could. But there's hype out there around Justin Fields. Some sports books are reporting MVP liability on Justin Fields. I'm like, this is a Chicago Bear team that won 3 games last year. Now, you do see teams turning around from year to year, and the NFC is the weaker conference. But I think that's a pretty big jump right there. Listen, I'm in on Fields for fantasy. I've told you all that from the jump. Do I like him as a starting quarterback? I'm not sure. He's talking about he wants to throw for 3,000 yards and run for 1,000 yards this year. The only person that ever do that was Lamar Jackson, right? So let's not get carried away with our comparisons with Justin Fields. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Jalen Hurts. But he can be a fantasy football winning quarterback, 100%. So you got to get in on Jalen Hurts this year. And listen, that draft stock, that auction price is going to get higher for Jalen Hurts. Right now, QB 7, look for that number to move up. As far as Tennessee side of the ball, Malik Willis came in and played well. We also saw some Will Levitts. Tennessee could very well have one of the more difficult offenses as far as scoring in the league this upcoming season. So keep an eye on that. And when you start to add Tennessee Titans guys like Treylon Burks and D-Hop to your fantasy team, their quarterback situation could be sketchy this season. Carolina Panthers and New York Jets. Jets 27, Panthers 0. The Jets cash as a 3-point underdog, so the money line hits as well. The under 35 comes in as the Panthers in their first bit of preseason action could not muster up nothing. Bryce Young, 4 for 6 for 21 yards. Saw him get sacked a couple times, did not look good in his debut. But listen, there's still reason to be optimistic about the Panthers, mainly because they play in the NFC South, a very winnable division for them. Panthers coming in around that 275 to about 325 range, depending on where you do your shopping at. So there's optimism in Pantherland, and there's a lot of optimism in New York Jetland, obviously, as we know that they are one of the liabilities right there. So I do think that we got a good look at what the Panthers are trying to do as far as the New York Jets. That optimism is not going to slow down anytime soon, as they are a team that has a liability to actually be Super Bowl champions at most sports books. Jacksonville Jaguars 28, Dallas Cowboys 23. Jacksonville cashes as a 3.5-point favorite. They get the 5-point win. Also, another preseason game where the over comes in, over 37.5. These trends are stuff to remember. Preseason overs, underdogs, don't bet the spread, bet the money line. This game right here, interesting running back situations developing. Tank Bigsby, 9 carries for 52 yards. Bigsby is a guy that's drafted. He's a guy that's wagered on in auctions. Bigsby is going to be somebody that's going to make a dent for fantasy purposes this season. And then Deuce Vaughn, 8 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown for the Dallas Cowboys. Already saying that Vaughn is stepping up to be that RB2 behind Tony Pollard in Dallas. Very shifty, very fast, very exciting young player. Deuce Vaughn is going to be a fantasy asset this season, so keep an eye on that one. You'll see the draft stock of Bigsby and Vaughn raise up this season. As far as the Dallas Cowboys, they'll be a contender in the NFC. We already know that. And the Jacksonville Jaguars favorites right now at minus $1.50 in a lot of shops to win their division. I would never lay 150, but listen, the Jaguars are going to be a strong team this year. They are going to compete. Final one I want to get to, Las Vegas Raiders, San Francisco 49ers, Raiders 34, Niners 7. Raiders as a 4.5-point dog, hit on the money line. And the over cashes. That's that same trend that we're seeing. But Trey Lance, 10 of 15 for 112 yards. It doesn't sound bad on paper, but he took 4 sacks, did not look comfortable, did not look in command of the offense. I still think that Lance is going to turn out to be one of the all-time worst draft picks. You trade up and get a guy like this. He hasn't really played big-time football since 2019, struggles to stay healthy. It looks like he's struggling to catch on to what many call the most fantasy-friendly or the most quarterback-friendly offense in the NFL with Kyle Shanahan. So, listen, Brock Purdy should be the starter. Health is the case. But Trey Lance is going to fall to third on the depth chart. I do think Sam Darnold will make the jump right there. 49 is still a team that's going to be in play as far as winning the NFC, but I think that the Seattle Seahawks could have possibly closed the gap right there. So I like the Seahawks to win that division. So that was a recap of what we saw and what went on, some fantasy and betting thoughts I wanted to give you based on some of the weekend preseason action that we saw. Definitely good to have football back on the screen, and definitely good to be talking about it with you all right here. Don't forget the Bettor Sports Network. We got you covered, whether it's fantasy, whether it's getting your bets right. This is the place to be as we prepare to push in to the 2023 NFL season. All right, that's all I got for you today. Heather Klein, thank you very much for getting it done on the production end. It's your boy Corey Parson, the Fantasy Exec. Should be back with the full crew tomorrow right here in the morning time, debating the hottest topics in sports. So for everybody right here at the Bettor Sports Network, to my fabulous producer, Heather Klein, Corey Parson, the Fantasy Executive, we are out, and have a better morning.